Mr. Fox Turns Magician. Business had been very dull with Mr. Fox, and one day he was wondering what he could do when he happened to see in a book he was looking over two pictures, one of a man with a hat in his hand and a rabbit on a table which he had just uncovered. The other picture showed the man again lifting the hat, and the rabbit had disappeared. And right then Mr. Fox had one of his big ideas. He would turn magician and make the wood folks pay to see him do tricks, a chicken or a duck being the price of admission to see the wonderful show. It did not take Mr. Fox long to figure out how it all could be done. He found two big tree stumps near his home, which were just suited for his purpose. Then he ran over to Mr. Man's barn, where he had seen an old tall hat hanging on a peg, and borrowed it. Of course he must have a helper, two, in fact, for Mr. Fox was not really a magician, only a make-believe one. Therefore he would need Bunny Rabbit and his brother Bobby Rabbit, who were so alike that their own mother could not tell them apart, and had to tie a blue ribbon around Bunny's neck so she would know he was not Bobby. Mr. Fox promised the Rabbit brothers all the tender lettuce heads they could eat after the show if they would help him and do just what he told them. "It won't be hard," he explained to Bunny and Bobby. "All you have to do is this. Bunny hides in one stump and Bobby in the other, and I cover you both over with chips and moss so it will look as if there were no one inside. And then when I begin my tricks, I will wave a stick over the hat I have placed on the stump and say, 'Rabbit, up here!' Then the one that is in the stump jumps up so that when I remove the hat, there you will be. Then I shall cover you and wave the stick and say, 'Rabbit, disappear!' And down you go inside the stump, and I shall go to the other stump and placing the hat on it, wave the stick and say, 'Rabbit, up here!' And up jumps the one who is in that stump. You see how it is to be worked, don't you?" asked Mr. Fox. "Of course all the folks who are watching will think I am a magician, and you must never, never tell. If you do, well, I am not sure what I would do if you did." Bunny and Bobby Rabbit said they never would tell, and thinking of the lettuce they had been promised, they hopped along with Mr. Fox to practice for the great event. The next day all the wood folk gathered near Mr. Fox's house to see the show, and knowing they'd be certain to get there at an early hour, Mr. Fox had taken care to put Bobby and Bunny Rabbit in their places long before the guests arrived. Of course he took off the blue ribbon which Bunny wore around his neck, so that the audience would think it was the same rabbit that appeared each time he lifted the hat. When all was ready, Mr. Fox came out of his house, dressed in black velvet suit, trimmed with gold braid, and looking very handsome. In one hand he held a tall silk hat, and in the other he carried a smooth stick. Smiling and bowing to the company who sat around him with open eyes, and some of them with mouths open as well, Mr. Fox asked them to choose 3 from among those in the audience to come forward and look at the stumps and see that had nothing concealed, that his performance was really one magic skill. "As Mr. Turtle is one of the oldest and therefore one of our wisest citizens," said Mr. Fox, "I think he should be one of the 3 selected. And of course Mr. Owl also is wise, so he should not be overlooked. And Mr. Bear, being the biggest citizen, of course, should be on the committee." Having chosen the 3 who would be the least apt to dig into things, Mr. Fox had, without the audience suspecting it, selected just the 3 he wanted, and they came forward and looked into the tree stumps, each of which was filled with chips and moss, which Mr. Fox had poked with his stick to prove to them there was nothing concealed. Of course he was careful not to poke hard. After the committee had reported that all was as it should be, Mr. Fox stepped in front of one stump and placed his silk hat upon it. Now, if you all will give me your attention, I will show you how, with the wave of my magic stick, I can produce under this hat a live rabbit, said Mr. Fox, and everybody watched and held their breath. Waving his stick over the top of the hat, Mr. Fox commanded, "Rabbit, up here!" And lifting the hat with a flourish, what was his astonishment to find there was nothing under it. "Ah!" said he, recovering himself quickly. "I see I did not keep my mind on the magic art as I should have done. Now, everyone, please be quiet as possible, and this time I shall not disappoint you." In a very loud voice, for Mr. Fox suspected that the rabbit in that stump was asleep, he commanded as he waved the stick, "Rabbit, up here!" and at the same time raised his hat. And there was the rabbit sitting under the hat, as large as life. Mr. Fox was bowing and smiling when he happened to look at the other stump, and there sat the other rabbit, blinking in the most surprised manner, while the spectators, seeing through the trick, angrily demanded back the price they had paid to see the show. Both little rabbits had fallen asleep, and when Mr. Fox had called out in a loud voice, each one thought he was at his stump, and both jumped up. And, to make matters worse, at that moment Mrs. Rabbit, who had missed her children, came running along, calling their names, and both little rabbits hopped down from the stump on which they were tremblingly sat and ran to her. Mrs. Rabbit gave one look at her children and then cried out, "Two Bobbies! Where is Bunny?" Bobby and Bunny Rabbit looked at each other. The blue ribbon was gone from Bunny's neck, so how could they both be sure? But Bunny said faintly, "Here I am, Mother. I am Bunny." "Oh, my child, how can I ever be sure which is Bunny?" sobbed Mrs. Rabbit. Mr. Fox, who was in trouble enough now, did not want any words with Mrs. Rabbit, so he brought from the house the blue ribbon. But when he looked at the twin rabbits, he stood still and stared. "Which is which?" he stammered. Mrs. Rabbit's tongue was loosened. "See what you have done!" she cried. "Mixed up my children so that I can't tell them apart. You meddling old nuisance!" What more she would have said, Mr. Fox did not stop to hear. He dropped the ribbon and fled. He had had enough of being a magician. But later, as he sat thinking it over, he said, "I wasn't so bad, after all, on the magic business, for no matter what anyone else may say, Mrs. Rabbit thinks I am a magician. I have mixed her children up so that she can't tell them apart."